I'd worked most of my life in industry, and as a retirement package, or a near retirement package for myself, I studied archaeology, and I managed, through the Heritage Council and through Galway County Council, to get a position that sustained me for 15 or 16 years or whatever it was before I retired 5 years ago. But we all have to retire at some stage, and thankfully I'm actively retired now. I like to think that I'm an active retired community archaeologist. I don't have active retired written there, but I am. And you don't retire because I came out here quite a bit today, volunteerism. I was actually at an award ceremony last night, it was more than a Heritage Award, but I was focused on the Heritage Award side of it, where a 96-year-old lady was given our County Heritage Award last night for her activity and volunteerism. And probably 20 years ago, and it just shows how communities and how people and community archaeology works, and how broad community archaeology can actually be. But this lady, probably 20 years ago, maybe more, had been seeking help to do something about a graveyard and ultimately a medieval Third Order Franciscan friary that stood in that graveyard. And at the time she approached that, you couldn't get into it with weeds and grass and stuff like that. Now, those of us maybe working professionally in community archaeology would be saying, whoa, hang on, you don't have to cut it all the way on that. But, there's things that we do and procedures we follow. But this lady was just so driven by this. And I remember I used to go out with Marie Mannion, our heritage officer, and all we could do at that stage was offer, I suppose, support. Because there was no money or anything available a number of years ago for works, which is what she wanted to do. But what she noted last night when she was asked to give her speech was that she spoke to one local councillor. She pestered one local councillor, I was told, by her niece. This is a little bit of an aside now. She pestered this poor councillor until eventually he found a grant for her. And the very first thing she did, she bought a wheelbarrow. That wheelbarrow that led 20 years later to the full conservation of that Third Order house that was falling down. She didn't think she'd ever see it. She certainly wasn't expecting an award last night, but it just shows how volunteers and community activists and people working in the world of heritage and archaeology are appreciated by the broader world. Now, I have to see what I have to do here to move a little bit further. You don't need to look at that. First of all, I suppose, what is community archaeology? Well, community archaeology is very broad, very, very broad. 25 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, community archaeology in itself wasn't technically, or maybe not really regarded as a profession as such. And even still, it's part of the wider gamut of archaeology, but I suppose a lot of people were busy making livings, a lot of development taking place and stuff like that, and then we had the downturn. And a lot of archaeological companies actually went looking to see if they could maybe eke out a living in a different area. So there has been more of a focus from the professional archaeologists on community archaeology in the last number of years. And we have a lot of outfits that are actually working in this. But if we were to look, I suppose, for a publication on community archaeology, there's only one real publication in the country that, outlines or describes or carries a number of papers on community archaeology. First of all, I just want to quote here from Christine Baker, first of all. Christine was the actual editor of the Partnership and Participation publication that I'm talking about. But Christine has more or less, I suppose, outlined what community archaeology is in the Fingal Community Archaeology Strategy, and I think this is probably something that could be almost adopted as the strategy for the country. She says, first of all, there is no one accepted definition for community archaeology, and the term can encompass building, geophysical, landscape and topographical surveys, oral history and school-based projects, graveyard restoration, archive research, heritage trails and signage, citizen scientist projects, field schools and summer camps, in addition to archaeological excavation. And she also notes that community archaeology is a partnership between community members and professional archaeologists. It can also contribute to an environmentally friendly, socially inclusive, sustainable future. And She also said this is important to note that archaeological excavation, geophysical survey, and the use of a metal detector, and this is very, very important. I suppose it's the sort of thing that we as volunteers on the ground have to be aware of. That the use of metal detectors, all of this requires a licence issued to those eligible through the National Monument Service and National Museum of Ireland. And I suppose in doing good work, we have to ensure that we follow the correct procedures. And that's very, very important, because we're one of the countries that actually has a National Monuments Act since 1930. Has been revised so many times since. And the most latest revision has been a very broad revision. It has actually brought in other monuments. Up until relatively recently, anything post-dating 1700 wasn't technically regarded as archaeology and didn't get recorded on the record of monuments and places, or the RMP as we call it, even though it should be to be looked at during planning and things like that. There may be certain things that would have to be incorporated. In fact, I suppose the way around it initially was that anything that was a built structure was protected under the Planning and Development Act of 2000. And then there was a lot of stuff that fell through the cracks in there. But thankfully we have a long history of protective legislation. But we also probably have a long history of breaking those regulations as well. And that's, I suppose, as community activists, we have to be careful, and we do have to make ourselves aware of the Act and what we're expected to do in all of that. This is probably reiterating, and I'm sort of outlining some of the stuff that we have to do. And this is very important, because even something like the Adopt a Monument program, when we're looking at any of these programs, or maybe looking for support or looking for financial supports, we have to be very aware of the legislation. We also have to be aware of simple things, and it has been mentioned already. For example, before undertaking any project, have a clear idea of what you want to do. Have a plan. You need to have a plan to know, what exactly do you want to do. You just can't just plow in there. You need to have some idea. Very importantly, and a lot of communities don't do this, or at least they don't do it in time, or they don't think about it, and they have engaged, and maybe when they go for funding or that, they find then, no, we have a problem here. But that is to identify the owners of the property and get their permission before undertaking any work. We can't presume, because our family members are buried in the graveyard, that we have access to it. Somebody owns it. It could be the local authority, it could be the Church of Ireland, it could be the Roman Catholic Church, it could be some other entity. But we need to know who owns that piece of property, or whatever the particular monument is. We have to identify the owners, and we have to have permission, written permission from the owners, in order to proceed. The other very important thing, and something that Melanie will probably be talking about after me, but seek the professional advice from your county heritage officer. All counties now, I'm pretty certain, I think all of the counties now have a heritage officer. It took a few years to get there, but eventually the Heritage Council were able to cajole and coax all of the local authorities to employ a heritage officer. And that was a wonderful thing. That developed out of the 1995 Heritage Act, which was something that changed the landscape, if you like, of heritage in Ireland. And if the monument or the feature, the structure is, if it's a protected structure, then also speak to your architectural conservation officer. Not all counties have conservation officers yet, but where there isn't one, the heritage officer will advise you, give you some advice as to the status and whatever else you might need to know. Very simply, and I didn't bring a copy of it, but because there's one for every county, but check the record of monuments and places, simply known as the RMP, to confirm if there are any archaeological constraints in place. It's very important to know that if you're going working on a site, that particular site isn't protected. In fact, it's just good practice anyway. And even if you're pursuing works like that, treat it as if it is a recorded monument. Show the same deference to it. If it's a recorded monument, this is one of the things where communities often get caught up. I'll give you the background first. Community archaeology is much broader than this, but if it is a recorded monument, you will require written permission from the National Monument Service before any works can be undertaken, and that's That's the law. That's the National Monuments Act. So you need 2 months notification in writing before you can start. So there's a lot of things to be done in advance. And you will also be required, if it's, again, an archaeological monument, and that's what we're talking about here is community archaeology, you will undoubtedly have to employ the services of a professional archaeologist, because while in other jurisdictions, amateurs, and that's not to put down amateurs, because I would have regarded myself as an amateur archaeologist all my life, but amateurs aren't allowed to excavate or do certain works here in Ireland. In fact, the majority of archaeologists in Ireland don't carry a licence, so they cannot excavate or do any works like that. It's only those that are licensed, that hold a licence, that can actually undertake the works, or at least get a licence to undertake the works. So some works will require a licence, and in that case, you're going to have to employ a licensed archaeologist. And the other thing, and I know from Helen, and I know the way that she approached her project, that all of the different agencies and the different aspects of heritage were catered for when they approached the project. But if undertaking works to an archaeological monument, you're also required to give due consideration to natural heritage and biodiversity. Seek the professional advice of your county biodiversity officer or heritage officer. And I see county is spelled wrong there, but anyway, that's okay. This is just the general, it's an extract from the legislation on that there. Works on or near an archaeological monument requires written permission, etc., etc. It's really a repeat of what I've already said. The last paragraph there, the Historic and Archaeological Heritage and Miscellaneous Provisions Acts of 2023, is the most recent addition to all of this. And it's quite broad and quite general. It includes all sorts of things. And in fact, the word thing is used as a descriptive term in there. So it's quite loose. It's a way of being able to allow consideration by the National Monument Service about certain aspects that might otherwise have been ignored in the past. Now, this is the book that I'm talking about. This was published a number of years ago. I probably should look inside the cover. I can't remember what year it was, and I might actually have it on the next page, I don't know. But in 2020, it's very, very recent. Partnership and Participation, edited by Christine Baker. And Christine was the community archaeologist in Fingal. Christine is now the heritage officer in Fingal. But she has been really and truly an activist for community archaeology in Ireland. She's been one of the people that has done so much, and she has operated so many community archaeology programs and projects with her excavations and that, all including volunteers and community members, all worked around the community. But that's a worthwhile publication. And you'll get it from Wordwell. Not advertising for Wordwell, just saying that if you want a publication that looks at community archaeology in Ireland, that's worth getting. And not advertising again, but if you rush, there's about 3 copies left in Charlie Burns and Galway at $10 each. And then you'll have to go back to Wordwell's prices. But I don't think Nick Maxwell will mind me telling you that there's cheaper copies in Galway. I'm biased, I'm afraid. Anyway, the other thing, and this is where we go back to what Helen has just outlined, the Adopt a Monument programme. And this has been a very important programme. This was an initiative that was brought in by the Heritage Council themselves in order to be able to develop a framework and a support system for communities engaged with archaeology. So inside in this, well, I have the older, I just picked up I didn't realise the new copy was out, but this is the old copy, and it gives you a step-by-step guide, gives you a lot of information, a step-by-step guide as to how to apply to be considered for the Adopt a Monument programme. Not all communities that apply get accepted. There's a limited amount of resources that can be spent every year. There's a limited amount of groups that a BARTA can actually handle in a year. It's all about management. And then the other thing is, if you're too good, well, you don't really need supports. There's groups out there that, and if you don't step up to the plate and if you don't have all your permissions in place, very simple things. filling out the form. If the form isn't filled out right, well, sadly, you won't get through the gap, because there's such competition that when it's being marked and rated, people can eliminate themselves by the very fact that they don't fill out that form. Every box in the form requires an answer, and it's not that hard. And in some cases, if you speak to Roisin or to Neil himself, they'll actually help you. Well, not in some cases, they will help you there with stuff, but things such as permission and stuff like that, they don't go out look for the permission for you. And community groups at times have actually failed to get that permission. And the other thing, of course, is also, what is a group? One person on their own may not actually be a group. They may not, or maybe they don't have the capability to carry it. You have to show that you can actually take this on board and deliver it. And we can see that with Helen Farrell's situation. They took on a major project and delivered it very professionally at the end of the day. And that's what's required out of all of this. But anyway, the Adopt a Monument was a scheme that was really based on a Scottish scheme that was in place first. And I remember I was still working at the time, having the pleasure of being at a meeting where a representative from the from Scottish body that were doing this came over to Kilkenny, and we met. We all had the chance to sit down and discuss this, and Ian Dial at the time managed to put it in place and roll it out. So it's now in place for Ireland, and it's a wonderful scheme. But as I say, only a limited amount will be able to get on that every year. It's not infinite. So it's a little bit of a competition in there to get in. But if you're good enough, there's no point being in there. You're literally wasting space. It's to be able to guide people that want a little bit or need a little bit, and the people evaluating will see that in the applications. Now, community archaeology can take all sorts of forms. That's me with a hat and the glasses in the background, sort of gritting my teeth. I don't know why, I just can't smile for a camera, but anyway, that doesn't matter. But what we were at there, this was in a place called Mount Pellew in East Galway. It was a walled garden. It wasn't an archaeological monument per se, but it was a project that was taken on by the community where they wanted to do something with a walled garden that they had leased from Quilcha. And what we were actually doing here is Gary Dempsey is to my left. Gary undertakes photogrammetry and stuff like that. He runs a 3D survey company, among other things. But what we were doing here is we were working with the local community, but also working with the transition year students here from the local secondary school. And effectively what we're doing here is we were showing the youngsters here how to undertake photogrammetry. And that was it was a very proactive project in itself. In fact, these guys much preferred to be pulling down ivy and doing stuff like that than doing photogrammetry. But we got them onto the photogrammetry. We introduced them to excavation, to a bit of survey, and they were absolutely wonderful. But they were TY students, and TY students, if you harness them correctly, can be a wonderful addition to your local community archaeology project. And that's them in action there with cameras and all sorts of stuff, taking photographs of walls and probably taking photographs of themselves while Gary and myself are lying on a gate over at the far side. Digital heritage age. It's grand when you can leave them to their own devices and step back from it for a while. But effectively what happened here is that we had this place fully modelled, a full 3D model of what were the old glass houses and the various garden buildings here. No harm can be done. And only good was affected at the end of the day. And of course they were able to print this as well, because one of the things they have in the school, which is amazing, they actually had a 3D printer. So all different aspects could get involved in the project here. This is a dig that's, well, it's going on currently, and I think it was going on last year as well in the Knoll. This is the community dig here. And again, this is something that's run under the auspices of Fingal County Council, again with Christine. But you can see the community engagement here, where you can see the community where they're involved. This is a more adult community that's involved here in this particular project. But they cut a few trenches here. They're undertaking some excavation And I suppose the other thing that happens in a lot of these cases is that you will have the professional archaeologists in here on these digs as well. You must. You don't have a choice in that. In England, not necessarily here in Ireland, and I'm not even sure, I don't think you can actually do it, you can't do it in the north of Ireland, but in England, voluntary groups would say historical societies and archaeological societies of long-standing, if you like, who have acquired certain skills, can undertake excavation on certain non-scheduled sites. We don't do that here in Ireland. We have a stricter policy, and I actually think ours is a better policy because, unless you can train people up, it's not a realm that you want to move into, because archaeology, especially excavation, once you excavate, you have actually destroyed the monument. So it's destructive. So, you're recording, you're preserving by record. But this community dig here started in 2019 and was requested by Naul County Council to take the form of a community excavation during National Heritage Week 2019. This is a big undertaking. And you can see there, they were going to extend the graveyard. So it's a good opportunity for something like this. But this doesn't always happen. If you're lucky enough that you have this opportunity and can tie in with some group, it's a good partnership. But generally, this sort of stuff doesn't be able to happen in most places. This is St. Mary's in Ferns. This was an excavation that was led by the Irish Archaeological Field School. Now, the Irish Archaeological Field School are based in Birr, and they would be a professional outfit. But I suppose in the past, what they would have been doing is they would have been working with students from abroad, the US and places like that. But here you can see them, they're actually working with the local community, with the kids and that as well. These outfits have to sustain themselves, so they are looking towards the commercial world as well. But what they're doing as well is they're working with communities. So it's an opportunity to engage in community archaeology. And maybe some of you might be in that position that you'd be able to find a similar sort of partnership for yourselves. And this is what I love. I was at my grandson's school. He's only 5 recently, and Grandad was asked to come in. He's asked to come with a box of bones or a bag of bones, a bucket of bones I had actually. Some of those bones were fresh off the animals, but there were dinosaurs, which isn't something that archaeologists dig for normally, and certainly don't dig for in Ireland. But we found a lot of dinosaurs, and it's amazing to watch the excitement of kids with trowels, who they're just scrambling, and especially when they're looking up to you and they really want to say, I found one, I found a dinosaur, when all they had actually found was a deer's skull or maybe a few old horse bones, but that's fine. To them, it was a dinosaur. But this sort of stuff is great because kids just act and interact with all of this, and it creates a bit of an excitement. But what it does, it creates a stir in the community, not just with children, but also with their parents and that. And it's another way of engaging people. And it's, the sandbox, the big dig. Some of these things are playing archaeology, but they can have impacts of their own that actually creates a certain awareness. And this was touched on already. This is one of the ways that all community groups that are interested in heritage and maybe interested in archaeology and, in this case, genealogy and other things, can engage. There's no restrictions here as such, but this is recording your local graveyard. It's a wonderful undertaking, very important undertaking, because so many people benefit from it. Personally, one of my great interests is iconography, both religious and secular iconography. I could speak about it for a week, and there would be just one motif, I'm afraid. But you can bore people to death with it. But it's a wonderful project. In this case, it's John Tierney's outfit, Historic Graves, we're doing it here. But what they do, and what other outfits do, they teach you how to use particular lights, taking photographs, how to use recording sheets, how to actually read almost illegible inscriptions without destroying a stone. And I suppose the outcomes from some of this is all of that community activity. You can see here that some of these guys are, they're of a more mature vintage here. But it's a wonderful way of getting groups involved. to record their own graveyard. Francis was actually talking about this recently to me, earlier in the day to me, where we get people in to actually record on that. But this is one project that any community can take on with a little bit of advice and a little bit of support. In Galway, we use a new technique now. It's survey 123, which means you can actually use your phone. You take a photograph. You already have a map in place. Somebody does a drone survey. They capture the particular graveyard. They're able to set the particular points on it, and now you can actually digitally mark each grave as you go along by taking a photograph and input your data there and then. And you can edit it when you go home. Even if you don't have coverage, you can upload it when you go back home later to where you have internet coverage. But it's a wonderful program, and it is community archaeology. It's an aspect of community archaeology. This is a very strange situation. As community archaeologist, I encountered a lot of different scenarios. Some of the gentlemen you see in the background here are no longer with us. You develop relationships and friendships when you're out with communities, and this is one of the paybacks for the community archaeologists, because you are part of the community. But the gentleman on the left there at one stage said, if that lad had go home, we could go on with this. And that lad was me. I'm the one that's taking the photograph. These guys went out 50 years. Well, maybe not 50 years to the day. 50 years previous to this photograph, a local priest was ordained in the parish of Woodford in southeast Galway, up on the foothills of the Slieve Aughties. And at the time, the parish priest sent out a bunch of young lads, and it just shows how things can repeat themselves, sent out this bunch of young lads to try and find the body of a priest that was lost in a snowstorm back around the 1790s or the early 1800s. Nobody knows his name. They think it could be Father Kelly. Nobody knows for certain. Nobody knew exactly where it was, but they had an idea. And some of these older men had been out 50 years previously looking for this fellow's bones to bring him back in and give him a decent burial inside in the graveyard. And they got driven out of the mountain with midges. It was like the locust or the plague of locusts or whatever, but they got attacked anyway. So they left. But the Connacht Tribune picked up on this piece of history from 50 years, republished it. The guys got all excited again, went out looking for this fella, and the son-in-law there with the arms folded behind the tree rang me. He said, Christy, he said, could you come out? He said, my father-in-law and a few of the other lads are going out looking for. Oh, I said, I will. I'll go up, I'll try. Because what I was trying to convince them is that, no, lads, you can't do this. Maybe 50 years ago you could do it, but now, we have a different view of what is archaeology and what's not archaeology, and it's much better to leave things alone. Just record the spot. If you know this is it, we'll put an X on the map, and we'll have done our duty of care. But anyway, they weren't having it, but they didn't find him. He's still there. And this is some of the same characters. Community archaeology can have all sorts of guises and different things, even recording some of the things that's happening traditionally. This was a mass on the 15th of August in a place called Lochatoric. Lochatoric is a little townland up in the Slieve Aughties. These guys were sitting along a bank up there beside a mass rock that was an 18th century chapel, who lost its altar stone in 1954 down to the village for a Marian shrine. The local guys got an eye and they went up the mountain and they took a hearthstone out of a house and they built a mass rock. So this is a real mass rock of the mid-20th century, but they have mass there every summer, and you can see, they're reliving a tradition. But this is also archaeology, because I can tell you that, I can tell you when this mass rock was made. I can also show you the outlines there of the penal chapel and that. But that's the sort of stuff the communities can actually do. They can engage with those stories. They can engage with those people. They can find out. And the other thing, of course, is when I engage with these people, and it was part of what I was doing, most of those people are of Ulster stock. They're people that came down after the Battle of the Diamond in 1795, known locally in southeast Galway as Ultuks. They have a whole culture of their own, and they have a whole archaeology of their own, which is interesting. But that's another day's work. And this is our community archaeologist. This is Bernie Doherty. Bernie is at work here at a place called Kilbucht, and I talked about that lady, that 96-year-old lady. You can see her there with the yellow jacket on her. That's the lady who was instrumental in having that church behind her there conserved. She won an award last night for her input to community heritage and to community archaeology. And that's the woman who, 20 or 25 years ago, when she got her first grant, bought a wheelbarrow. And in many ways, she inspired. She didn't know. We kept appeasing her, telling her, well, sometime when we have money, we'll try and help. But there is no money at the moment. And then what happened after that was almost miraculous in the world of community archaeology. The Community Monuments Fund was put in place by the department. And all of a sudden, there was money available for projects like this. And it's absolutely amazing the amount of good work that has been done out of the Community Monuments Project. But anyway, enough of that. That's a wider group there. These are just people they came out to see the works that were done. And also some of the community group there. I think this was maybe for Heritage Week last year or sometime like that this was put on. And the lady on the far left there, that's the niece of Katie Duan, and she was really the lady that put all of the paperwork together and pulled all of the community together and developed a team around her and worked with the community archaeologist and worked with the Galway County Heritage Officer, Marie Mannion, to effect that. The Community Monuments Fund, just very quickly, and I don't know whether Melanie was going to speak about this or not, but the Community Monuments Fund provides funding to help owners and custodians of archaeological monuments to safeguard them into the future. The fund supports projects that conserve, maintain, protect and promote local monuments and historic sites, and is available to individuals, community groups and businesses. It's kind of broken down into different categories and it relates to heritage and conservation. Who can apply? Well, if you're the owner or custodian of an archaeological monument, you can propose a project for funding under the scheme. And it has to be, the monument has to be on the record of monuments and places. It has to be a recorded monument. It can't be a national monument. If the state owns it, the state is responsible for it. Communities don't have that responsibility. And that's the website there underneath. I'm not too sure if I have anything else there now. I may have. No, I haven't. But just to say that community archaeology is very, very broad. It's absolutely anything that you do in many ways around or including archaeology. It can be as simple but effective as a walk to a nearby castle or church where you have access. It can be organising a talk. It can be doing something like conservation works or recording a graveyard. There are just so many different areas that the community can engage with within archaeology. Looking at the notion of excavation and that, you're looking at something that's much bigger. You're looking at something that's going to cost money because you have to hire on the professionals. But again, like earlier advice, seek out the professionals in your own locality. If you're over in my corner of East Galway, you'd be going for old retired guides like me and you'd be bringing us out for a day to try and get as much as you can out of us for free. And it's happening, I can assure you, it happens all the time, but it's very, very important. But do seek professional advice in anything you do in relation to archaeology, because the very last thing that you want to happen is that a community group that's setting out to do right by something actually falls foul of the Act, or maybe something around insurance, or something around ownership or something like that, because people don't go out on these projects to do harm, but sometimes what they might do might be misguided. And that's only just a bit of friendly advice. It's not a threat. My role in the past was not to threaten or upset anybody, it was to give advice. So I just hope it's of some use, but I still keep on enjoying community archaeology. Thank you.